Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin Bladel and I am an artist and art educator in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And today I am going to show you how to do a DIY weaving for coasters that look like this. So we're going to be making our own looms and using supplies that hopefully you have a lot of already in your home, or you don't have to get a lot of materials here. So weaving is really fun. I picked it up a couple of years ago because I just wanted something to be able to do like while I was watching TV or just like hanging out at home. And weaving can be really meditative, really relaxing, and you can do a lot of different stuff with it. So this project is perfect for people who maybe have never done a weaving before, or they haven't in a long time, or even like younger, like teens and middle schoolers could easily do this project as well. And what's great about this is that you get something that you can use afterward, and if you really like the process, you can make them as gifts, or you could do them as like a party activity. There's a lot of different options. So let's get started. Okay, before we begin, let's make sure that you have everything that you need. So you're going to want to have a few different colors of yarn, just for variety in what you're making. If you have a yarn that is like this, that has like a variety of different colors, it might actually be pretty cool to just do the whole coaster like that. So it just depends on what you want, honestly. These are colors that I just had with me and they go well together, so that's what I grabbed here. You're going to need a scissors. You're going to need a regular just kitchen fork, a ruler, any kind of ruler is fine, a pencil, either like a large metal sewing needle, or this is like a plastic yarn needle. If you don't have either of those things and you don't want to buy them, that's totally okay. What I used earlier is I just took a Q-tip and I cut off the edges on both sides. So now I have this little plastic piece here, and I just took the tape and I taped it onto whatever yarn I was using, just on the end. Like that. And that's essentially functioning just as well as like the needle would. So if you don't want to buy a needle and you don't have one, don't worry about it. You can just do that, and that's no big deal at all. So what else do we need? We also need cardboard, 2 pieces of cardboard. So one piece of cardboard is going to be your loom, and this needs to be 5 inches by 10 inches. Now, if you decide that you like this project and you want to make other things, you can make the loom as big or as small as you want to. This size in particular is great for the coasters because it gives us just enough room to make like a 4 by 4 inch coaster, and gives us space for our extra yarn that we're going to use for the tassels. The other thing that you want to make is just cut another piece of cardboard that is 1 inch wide and 6 inches long. We're going to be using this on our loom as well here. So once you have those 2 pieces of cardboard cut, you have all the rest of this stuff, you're pretty much ready to go. We will need either like Mod Podge or clear nail polish, or like super glue, and like a sponge or some way to apply that at the end. But that's not until later when we're done. So I'm just gonna move that stuff aside. And you only need the tape if you're making a needle with like a Q-tip or something like that. So the first thing that we want to do is we're going to make the loom. So what we need is that 5" by 10" piece of cardboard, and we're going to take our ruler. We're going to line it up at the top of our cardboard here, and we're going to make a mark at 1/2 inch on the cardboard, so 1/2 inch in. And then from there, we're going to make a mark at every 1/4 inch all across the cardboard. You want to have 16 lines across your cardboard. And if they're not like perfectly even, that's not a big deal, but try to get them as even as possible. And then you're gonna flip it around and you're gonna do the same thing on the other side. You're gonna start from 1/2 inch in, make a mark, and then make 16 marks at 1 every 1/4 inch. Okay, now what we're gonna do, once we have the marks on our cardboard, is we're going to take our scissors and we're gonna cut along those lines about 1/4 inch down on each line here. This is what we're gonna be putting our yarn through. So it needs to be long enough so that that yarn will stay in there. Once again, if you cut one a little bit longer, it's not a big deal. We just don't want them to be too long because it's gonna change the length of our yarn in the end. So just try to make it as consistent as you can, but there's no need to worry about it being perfect. And do that on both sides. Okay, so now I've cut both sides of the loom and it is ready to go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add what is called the warp to the loom. The warp is the vertical strands of yarn that we're going to place on our loom, and that's how the weaving is held together. We have the warp, which is the vertical strands, and then we have the weave, which is the horizontal strands that we're going to do across here. Really what's important about a warp is that it is tight, that there's good tension in the yarn. So what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be wrapping the yarn on the front and on the back of our loom, and that way we have good tension, and then we're also going to be able to make 2 coasters as well. So pick a yarn that you want to use for the warp. It doesn't matter what you use, but know that whatever you choose is going to be the color of the tassels, and it's also you might see it in your weave a little bit. So I used like a gray for mine when I originally did it, and because it was just like the plain sort of like neutral color. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to grab your color. You can keep it on the ball of yarn. You don't need to cut a piece off, but what you're going to do is you're going to tie a knot at the end and tie another knot. So 2 knots so that we've got a sizable knot here. You're going to put that into the top left edge of your loom, pull it so that that knot stays in there. I'm gonna rotate it this way for you guys here. Okay, and now what you're gonna do is you're gonna bring that yarn down to the bottom and hook it through that, that first notch at the bottom. Bring it up behind on the back and bring it to the second notch. And then go down like that. And you're just gonna keep wrapping it around, making sure that it stays in there, that it's tight. it should be the same on the other side. You should still see that vertical on the other side like that. So continue to do that until it reaches the end. So now I have both the front and the back. There, the string is across each side. And now I want to count and make sure that I have 16 rows on each side. Okay, so I have 16 rows on each side. And so now I'm going to cut the string and then tie another knot on this side. And this is just to keep that string in place while we're working. If you want to tape down the ends too, like just to, you know, be cautious, you can do that as well here. So we have a knot on either side, but they're at the top on both sides here. So now we have our warp. Our warp is done. And we are ready to start weaving. So choose the color that you want to start with. I am going to start with this one here. And you can choose whatever length you want to start. I usually just kind of take off kind of a large section. You can, it's very easy to add more if you want to later, so it's not really a big deal. So I have an amount of yarn here. Grab whatever you're using for your needle and just thread the yarn through. Before we start, what we want to do is we want to take this piece of cardboard that we cut, and we're going to put it on the bottom of our loom where we're starting, but we're going to weave it through. So we're going to go under the first strand, over the second, under the third, over the fourth, and so on. So we go every other, because weaving is over, under, and it's the same pattern. At least with this plain weave that we're doing, it's the same pattern every time. What this cardboard is going to do is it's going to give us a little bit of space in between our vertical strands of the yarn. And that's just going to help us weave. So one other thing that we want to do before we get started is we want to make sure that this piece of cardboard is kind of where we want our coaster to start. So our coaster is going to be about 4 inches by 4 inches. This is about a 4-inch width that we've created here. And so we're going to weave about 4 1/4 inches because it tends to shrink a little bit as we tie knots and stuff like that. So kind of take your ruler and just measure 4 1/4 right here. And notice if there's like more string down here. We want the string to be kind of even. So I feel like this is a good spot for this here. So we have our yarn. We are ready to begin. So the first thing that you want to do is you're just going to start by going over this first strand here. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going over the first strand, under the second, over, under, and we just continue that plain weave over, under through the whole warp for our first row here. When you get to this point, you're just going to pull that yarn through. And you want to leave about 3 inches of your strand here so that we can use that when we're done here. So bring that down. Down here to where your cardboard is if it got kind of far up. All right, and now we're going to do the next strand. So we ended over here with the yarn under the warp. So now when we come back around, we have to go over this strand here because we always have to do opposite. So we ended up under over here, so now we have to go over. And so now we just continue that weave. Bring it through. So one thing that you guys want to pay attention to is the tightness of this part of the weaving. So what sometimes happens, and I end up doing this a lot, is I really like it to be really tight, but then the weave kind of does this hourglass shape as we make it, and then that is upsetting in the end to have that here. So what I am going to do is you just kind of leave the weave with some space like this, and then you're going to take the fork and you're just going to kind of like comb that down. That way it doesn't have as much, it has a little less like tension and it's looser, easier to use here. So you just kind of play with it until it looks right to you. Okay, so now we're going to keep going. So now it was under on this side, and so now we go over, under. Always check to make sure your weave is correct. Once you get into it, it starts to get easier to like miss a warp. I mean, you'll be able to see very quickly if you missed one here. So once again, you just keep it loose like that, grab the fork. And bring it down. And then we're just going to keep going with this pattern. Keep doing this for as long as you want to with your yarn. If you're like, oh, I want to weave 1 inch. 1 inch with this yarn. That's cool. Do 1 inch, and then you can be done with that yarn. Or if you run out of yarn and you want to do more, then we'll just add more. So I will show you, once I finish this color, I will show you how we end this, end a color of yarn, and then start a new one. Okay, so I have woven most of my yarn through, and I also took my fork and sort of pushed the yarn tighter together. I like a tighter weave. You can see here a tighter weave. If you want a looser weave, it doesn't make a difference. It's just an aesthetic choice to make. You can leave the strand long like this whenever you decide to be done. You also see that the strand is on the other side. It doesn't matter what side you end on. We're going to be finishing all of these edges, so it doesn't matter what side you're on. The other thing that I wanted to show you is that you want to try to keep these ends consistent with as tight as they are. You want to try to keep them the same. Now, they're probably not all going to be perfect. Even like I've been weaving for a while and I still definitely have times where it's not perfect, and that's okay. It's not a big deal. So you just want to try your best. You're still learning, so this first one that you do might not be great, but it might be awesome. Who knows? So now you pick another color. I'm gonna do a little bit of this color here, and once again, I'm just gonna cut an amount of yarn. I'm not measuring or anything. I'm just gonna go with what I have here. Okay, so I recommend starting on the same side that you ended on. So you gotta just continue this weave, right? So we ended under this yarn over here, so now we're starting by going over. That's all we have to do. That's all that it takes to start a new color. Once again, you're going to bring the yarn through. And leave some extra string for later. And then just comb that with the fork down to the edge. And then keep weaving. Now this is a good time to think about how you kind of want your pattern to look. Do you want all of your colors to be the same width? Do you want them to vary? Do you want it to be stripes that go across and you do a bunch of different colors over and over again? Do you want like half of your coaster to be one color yarn? This sort of second color is maybe the time to think about what you want it to look like in the end. I'm probably just gonna do like a thin stripe of this dark blue. It's a thinner yarn, and so it takes longer to fill in the same amount of space as this this other yarn is. So I think this might just be sort of like an accent stripe. Remember want to keep that tension the same throughout. So just make small adjustments as you need to with that. And once again, just be checking as you go whether or not your weave you've got the right pattern. Like I said, it's easy to like miss or do two at a time, do two of the warp threads at a time, but you will see right away if the weave is different for sure. All right, so that's the amount that I'm going to do for that color. So I'm just going to cut the string, put this extra aside maybe for later, and then I think I'm going to do the rest in this blue here. So if you're doing a big chunk with one color, I would recommend doing it in a few strands of this, because you don't want to be pulling lots and lots of yarn through the weaving, because it starts to starts to sort of spin and get thin, and it kind of changes its shape actually when you're pulling through that much. So do just a kind of like a normal average amount, which I think is maybe about like a yard, maybe yard and a half, maybe is what I have on here. And then just add more if you need to. So this is going to be the only other color that I do on this coaster here. All right, so now the weaving is done. It is just a little bit over 4 inches, which is great because it will shrink just a tiny little bit when we tie the knots. So this coaster is done. What we're gonna do is just slide this cardboard out, and we are going to just simply flip our loom over, and now we have a whole nother side that we can do a coaster on. So for this coaster, what I'm going to do is just show you guys how to do a simple triangle shape. If you look online, you can see a lot of different types of shapes that you could do on a coaster or a weaving, but just for today, just for simplicity's sake, we're gonna do a triangle. So here's the coaster that I did that has this triangle shape on it. Once you do a triangle, you could do a small triangle in the middle, you could do a triangle this way and a triangle coming up this way, or just one down at the bottom like I did. So it's a pretty versatile shape once you figure out how to do it. So let's start by putting this cardboard piece back in to this side of the loom. Like so. And now we're going to start with the triangle. So choose what color you want your triangle to be. We're going to make a triangle that goes all the way across the length of the coaster like I did on this one here. Okay, so thread your needle, and what we're going to do first is we're going to find the center of our loom here. So just find the center. So here's the center 2 strands on our loom. What you want to do is you want to take your needle and you want to go under the strands until you reach the middle here. So as you can see, I'm under all of this warp right here. So now I'm at these middle 2 strands, and I'm going to go over this one, this strand, and under this one. We're making the top of our triangle. Make sure, as usual, that you're keeping some at the edge here. Okay, so I've gone over this one and under this one. And so basically what we're doing is we're just making a teeny tiny little weave with these 2 strands here. So now I'm just going to go over and under, back again, like so. I'll show you. So we just have this tiny little weave right here. We're going to do that. We're going to go back one more time, over, under, just with those two strands. So it's gonna look like that. So this is the point of your triangle. So I have 3 little weaves is what I have right here. And so now this next time when I go back, I'm gonna add another warp because we're gonna go out to make the triangle here. So I'm gonna go over, under, like so. But now I need to go over this one because now I'm adding another strand. And I'm also gonna add another strand on the other side. So now I'm adding this strand, this vertical piece right here. And now when I weave over, I'm gonna add another, I'm gonna keep adding a vertical strand from the warp every time to start creating that triangle. You can also, if you want to do like 2 rows, like if you want your triangle to have more of like a stylized feel, you could do 2 rows. Every time that you add a strand, you could do it 2 rows instead of just 1 like I'm doing. You can really change it up different ways, but I'm just gonna do every single line I'm adding another strand. It's getting a little bit wider every time is all that's happening. And we're gonna keep doing this until we reach the edge. Now keep trying to make the tension in your weave consistent. You don't want it to be too tight. And just watch how it's looking. All right, so I've reached the outside edge. On this side. Now at this point, this could be the bottom of my coaster. I could just leave this as the bottom. You could add more down here, which is what I did in the last one, and I liked that, so I'll probably do that again. But here is your triangle. You could do another triangle here, and that could be like in the middle of your coaster. So the only thing that I'm going to do now is I'm just going to move this up a little bit just because it's gotten a little further down than I'd like it to be. So I'm just going to take the fork and just kind of move those strands a little bit, push them together. All right, and now I'm going to fill in some of this area with this yarn as well here. So you see on this one, what is a little bit different than what we did last time is that the last coaster we started at the bottom and worked our way up. Now I'm kind of in the middle, and that's fine. Like you can kind of start wherever you want to, and that is not really a big deal. So let me add some more to the bottom, and then we will talk about filling in this empty space here. Okay, so I've added some extra length down here at the bottom of the triangle and then added like a little border. And so now what I'm going to show you is how to fill in these spaces on either side of the triangle here. So really what you're doing is you're just making another half of a triangle. You're just filling in the space. Now I find it easier to start with a longer length. You could also start at the bottom corner here, but I'm going to start up here at the top. So what I need to look at is where, if I need to start over or under. So this is over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. So I have to start under because all I'm doing is I'm just weaving up until the point of the triangle. And then we're gonna go back. I'm gonna go back. And then you're just gonna keep going, but you're always gonna go until you hit that space right here. So we're not ever gonna go onto this strand because there's already yarn woven on here. So we just weave until we hit the empty strand. But what I want to look at here is that I have two weavings actually. That little one, that little tiny weave that we did that twice. So I actually need to go one more time on that line. Just pay attention to your weave. Okay, we're gonna go back. And you're just gonna keep going. Remember, you're only going until you get to the empty vertical strand of yarn here. So each time it should be one less every time as you're going across this triangle here. And so that will just fill in the gap that we made, or the gap that was created from the triangle here. Remember to keep your tension consistent. And now I'm just gonna use my finger just to line all of that up. And there we go. We have filled in that gap. So I'm going to cut this piece here. And now I'm going to go to the other side and fill in this other side. Okay, so now I've added into the gap on the other side. I am going to finish up the length of this coaster, and then we will get to talk about how to take your coaster off of the loom, tie the knots, finish it, and you will be good to go. Okay, so now I have finished this weaving as well here, and so I'm going to take this out. So now we have this coaster and then our first coaster that we made here. It doesn't matter which side you do first, but what we're going to do now is we're going to cut the yarn up at the top. You want to get as close to the top as possible. We're just going to cut all of these. Okay. I'm going to leave it like this, leave this side uncut, and I'm going to tie these off. So you're going to take two strands at a time. You're going to wrap it around. Pull the yarn through and then make a knot. What you want to do is you want to watch how tight you're making your knots, because you're going to want to keep this line here as straight as you can. These knots are going to, of course, keep our coaster from unraveling here. Okay, so now I have one side done, and I am going to, of course, do the bottom side. Make sure that your weave is staying together. And then you're just going to do the same thing. Cut. Along the bottom. Just move this aside. And knot this part as well. Okay, so now I have knots tied on both ends, which is great. And now what we're going to do is we're going to flip our coaster over, and we're going to take a look at all these extra strands that we have everywhere here. So now what we need to do is we need to finish these so that they stay in place. So you're going to grab your, there it is, your needle. And what you're going to do is you're going to take a strand, thread it through, and what you're going to do is you're just going to bring it up into your weave. I would go about 3 strands into your weave. And you're just going to pull it through like so. And cut off the extra. And for ones like this on the edge, you're going to notice that this one is coming over. There's like a gap right here. So we want to loop that around, and so we're going to put it under these strands here, the ones right next to it. And that's going to give the loop shape that we need it to have here. Once again, go up like 3 or 4 weaves. Put it through. And cut the extra. We're going to keep doing this through the whole thing. So a strand, we have 2 different strands here. So this one, since it's coming from the bottom, it needs to be looped over and tucked in like right in here. But this one here, since it's coming from this back side, we can just tuck it in under here. But these ones that are coming from the other side, we need to make sure that they loop around first. So let's do that one. We're gonna loop it around this edge. We just wanna make sure that it comes around the edge here. And then we're gonna tuck it in right here. Make sure it's at the same, it looks the same on the edge. Loop this one. You don't want them to be put into the same row, because then the row will get too loose. So just bring it to like the row over. Just tuck it in the row next to it, if you've got 2 that are right at the same spot. All right, so now I have tucked in all of those edges. The front side looks great. And now what I'm just gonna do is cut these so that they're the same length. All right, so this coaster is almost complete. I am just going to set this one aside and do the same thing for this one, and then we will talk about how to finish the coasters. All right, we are nearly finished. Here are the 2 coasters. These are the fronts, so the backs have all of those areas that have been tucked in. And so now what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna grab Mod Podge or clear nail polish, or even like a liquid super glue would work as well. And you're just gonna wanna get just a little bit of that. You don't need a lot. And you're going to dab that onto those edges and onto the areas that you ran the yarn through. This is going to kind of seal it and keep it from unraveling. You can also, if you want to, Mod Podge your entire coaster. It's gonna give it, it's gonna make it a little bit hard, but it is gonna give it more of a seal than just leaving it as the yarn. I like it just as the yarn. So all I'm doing now is just sealing those spots that we put the yarn in. Check to make sure you got all of them. I'm just going to sort of press it down with my finger. I feel like that works for me better than the sponge. All right, so now we're just gonna let those dry and give it, I don't know, maybe like 15 minutes or so, and they should be dry. All right, well, once you've waited about 15 minutes for the Mod Podge or the nail polish or the super glue to dry, your coasters should be good to go and ready to use. And now, not only do you have these really cool coasters that you made, but you also know the basics of weaving, which is awesome. So if you enjoyed this, make a few more coasters, make a couple sets to give to friends, invite someone over to make weavings with you. And there's a ton of weaving information online, on Pinterest, or just on the internet in general. And you can make bigger weavings, you could learn some new techniques, you could even make a bigger cardboard loom. If you loved it a lot, go out to a craft store and get a loom and really sort of like dive in. There's like a whole lot of different opportunities with weaving, and I hope that this project at least gave you some idea of whether or not it's something that you like to do, and mostly I just hope that you had a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoy your coasters.